Thank you so much for joining us today for the Pastor's Potluck Podcast. Here on the Pastor's Potluck, it's similar to a normal potluck where you might get something that you want and there may be something that you just want to pass up altogether. And that's okay. There's something here for everybody. Our goal here is to encourage you and maybe in the process entertain you. If you're ready, let's dig in. All right, we are there. It is time.
Potluck time. We actually had a potluck yesterday.
Yeah, we did. It was not under the best of circumstances,
No.
but it was still, we celebrated a wonderful individual, got to know a lot about her through the memorial service, and I think one of the greatest things that can happen in someone's life is whenever they pass, they say, you know what, everybody knew that she was a Christ follower.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how much money someone has. It doesn't matter whatever. Just, I think that's like one of the greatest testimonies. And I hope that somebody, whenever I pass away and my family gathers and they just say, man, he loved the Lord. So
Yeah.
that's all that matters to me.
Yep.
Well, I'm pretty exhausted. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been what we did Southridge Camp for Friday and Saturday. Then we had services on Sunday. We had a creative meeting pretty much all day on Monday. Tuesday, we had that memorial, that celebration of life. And here it is. We're recording this on Wednesday. I'm toast.
Yeah, I can echo that. My week has been similar.
Yeah.
So we'll see what we have left in the tank for the potluck.
I know. Yeah, let's dig into a story in the Old Testament and try to make some sense out of it.
Once we start getting going, though, I'll hit my stride.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So the last time that you were here, we had a really good conversation about Abraham.
Yep.
And talking through some of the key moments in his life and how we can look at his story and find some application for our lives as well. And this week, I want to talk a little bit about his grandson, Jacob.
Yeah.
We're going to pass over Isaac for this week and just start talking about Jacob. And he's such an interesting story and individual to study because just in a nutshell, you see this very, very chaotic individual in terms of deception and deceit, and then see God's redemption in his life.
Yeah.
Whenever I was looking over and reading his story, I was like, the one thing that like popped into my mind, it reminded me of Loki in the Marvel movies, and his nickname was the God of Mischief.
Yeah.
I mean, he was always getting in trouble, doing stuff
Yep.
and tricking people and stuff like that. So I basically just want to kind of start from the beginning and what we know about Jacob. Obviously, we know that it is Isaac's son, but he was a twin.
Yep.
And in the Bible, it mentions his twin brother's name was Esau. And in the Bible, it mentions that him and his brother were fighting with each other, even in the womb.
Yeah.
Anything that we can unpack there? I mean, is this kind of setting up like what's to come in his life?
Yeah, it is. I believe that there's theological purposes as to why the writer of Genesis adds that in to that story. It is to really give us the implications and the insight into this is going to be a sibling rivalry that we need to take note of, but it's also going to be important as the grander story goes on that there is going to be two nations that are birthed from this that will ultimately be at odds for quite some time. And so that I think there's a theological nature behind some of the details that we get in the scriptures.
Yeah.
So it's telling us like this is a feud that's going to last. not just for now, but even through the ancestors. And you'll see the Israelites had issues with the Edomites and such as time continues to go on.
Yeah.
So it is telling us that. So it is really, really significant. And we're also going to see again in this in this story. This is a theme throughout all of the scriptures, that what was normal in the society, which is a practice called, I'm gonna butcher it because I'm brain dead, primogeniture. I think that's what it is, which is the blessing of the firstborn.
Okay.
Over and over again in the story of God, this is amazing. Especially you see it a lot in the Old Testament. It's normally the younger son that ends up being the blessed one, over and over and over and over again. And actually, this is prophesied to Jacob and Esau's mother. It's prophesied that the older will serve the younger, that the younger is going to be the one that the line continues through. The blessing is going to continue through. Which when you see that from the beginning, it actually almost breaks your heart for Jacob, because he ended up fighting most of his adult life for something that God had already said was true of him.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think, like, my goodness, how often is that true of all of us? We spend most of our lives trying to prove something's true about us that God from day one already said was true about you.
Yeah.
Like, you're trying to prove your worth and your value. You're trying to go out and show everyone just how special you are. And it's like, no, from the beginning, God already said that stuff is true about you. You don't have to go and prove that to anybody.
Yeah.
And so Jacob ends up living this really difficult life because he's out there trying to get something that he already got.
Oh.
And I thought, wow, I mean, that's all of us. We make our lives so much harder in pursuit of, honestly, something that God most likely has already said, no. You've got that validation already. You've got that acceptance. You've got that love. Don't go out and try to find those things from other people. That's just going to complicate your life. You've already got it.
Yeah, you're striving for something that you already possess.
Yeah, because, I mean, so Genesis 25, and the Lord told her, the sons in your womb will become two nations. From the very beginning, the two nations will be rivals. One nation will be stronger than the other, and your older son will serve your younger son. Like, from the beginning, but he's not even born yet. God says, it's going to be you, Jacob. You've already got it.
Yeah.
And then what do we see? Over and over, he ends up going about it the wrong way. Now, I have a sermon that I use a lot with teenagers around this topic, and it's one of the best things that I think God has ever given me. And he gave it to me first and foremost through Craig Groeschel. Groeschel, when I was early on in ministry, this is probably 11 years ago, preached a very similar sermon, and that was kind of the basis that got my wheels turning with this whole idea that I've kind of made into my own now. And as I dive into the story of Jacob, he already had the promise from before he was born. He spent the rest of his life until he has this encounter with God, trying to go and get what was already said to be his. But I think the reason why that is actually happens in the birth narrative. So, chapter 25 goes on. It says, and when the time came to give birth, Rebekah discovered that she did indeed have twins. The first one was very red at birth and covered with thick hair like a fur coat. So they named him Esau. We have to understand this Jewish society, like in ancient societies in general, the name meant everything.
Yeah.
The name was like who they are, but also who they are going to ultimately become.
Yeah.
Right? We have people that try to do this in our day and age and stuff, and then some of us just call our kids whatever the heck we want to call them, but
Jared.
like for them, like they're like, no. This name is who they are and who they're going to be.
Yeah.
So Esau comes out red, hairy, red, all that. They call him Edom. Then it says, verse 26, then the other twin was born with his hand grasping Esau's heel, meaning like he was literally, they're saying he was trying to fight to get out of the womb. That's their perception of what's happening. So he comes out literally second born, but grasping the heel of Esau. And so it says that, so they named him Jacob, or in Hebrew, Yaakov, and Isaac was 60 years old when the twins were born. Now, this is stuff that you've got to dive in to more than just what's there if you actually want to get the full picture of what's happening.
Yeah.
Esau is named Esau for the fact that he comes out red and hairy. Jacob is named Jacob because he comes out grasping the heel of his brother. So the Hebrew is Yaakov. Now in Hebrew, the word akeb is the word for heel. So they call him Yaakov. It's a play on the word heel. So talking about the fact that he was grabbing his brother's heel. Now also there is a Hebrew idiom, almost like what we have, like we say something about somebody in a certain way, and we know that it means something else.
Yeah.
So to be a heel grabber in the Hebrew context meant that you were going to be a deceiver, a cheater, a liar. Like to be a heel grabber, to be associated with akeb, that's what you were going to be.
Yeah.
So literally, the reason why Jacob takes the path that he does in life as a cheater and as a swindler and as someone who's always trying to get over on his brother came from what his parents did to him by naming him after that.
Yeah.
And it followed him until God finally changes his name.
Yeah.
So like as you go through the story, that's like there's so much right there. Like literally what they called him affected how he ended up living his life.
Yeah.
It was tied to it. So like that will just talk to you about the power of your words. Like before you tell your kid that they're no good, you might want to think twice, because eventually they will latch onto that label and just decide, if you called me no good, I'll just go and be no good eventually.
Yeah. Or naming them stupid.
Yeah.
You know,
call your kids stupid, and don't be surprised when they end up stupid.
Yeah.
Because ultimately we end up living out the labels that we have had attached to us.
Yeah.
Right? So at some point in my life, people told me that I was funny when I was doing destructive stuff in my life. And guess what I did? I upped it and got more destructive so I could continue to be the funny guy that did destructive stuff or whatnot. So that label, I latched onto it and I began to live it out. We begin to live out our labels if we're not careful. So those of you that are parents listening, you can. I know this might sound like some I don't know, name it and claim it type mumbo jumbo, but no, I'm telling you, you can actually affect the trajectory of your kid's life by the things that you speak to them as they are kids.
Yeah.
Quick example, Landon and Olivia are at a new school right now, and it's much more difficult than the last school that they went to. The jump, what we're finding out is the jump from second grade to third grade is difficult no matter where you go, and then that this school is just, it's even more heightened.
From public school to private school.
So like not only is it the jump from second to third grade, it also is the jump from public to private for this year. So the first couple of weeks of school, we were seeing some grades coming from him that was like
very worrisome.
It was like, whoa. My son has only ever had A's, maybe one B ever. Like, what's going on here? He's never struggled in school a day in his life. And so I was like, we're not working hard enough. And so he had a week. This was last week, I think. And he had a Bible memorization test. He had a cultural, social studies test. He had an English test, and he had a spelling test all on Friday. And so it's Thursday night. We get home from baseball practice, and it's already past their bedtime. But I'm like, look, bro, you're going to have to work hard because you got all this stuff and you're not ready for it. Because I told them they had to memorize the preamble of the Constitution. And Thursday night, man, he just couldn't do it. And I'm just drilling him. I'm like, dude, you're not ready for this. And then we're trying to learn the Bible verse, and they've got to learn the Bible verses in King James Version, which I'm not even sure I could do that.
Nope.
So I'm going over and over and over with it, and I'm like, oh my gosh. it's going to be another bad week.
Yeah.
So I just let him go to bed, and I said, all right, well, we're going to wake up in the morning and keep working hard on it. Well, we wake up in the morning, and he starts getting it. Like, he starts just knocking the preamble out. He's knocking the spelling words out. He's knocking the Bible verse out. And right before he gets up off the couch, I said, that was perfect, son. I said, you did it. I told you, if you work hard, you can do this. Now, I'm not joking. From that moment of me saying that to him, something clicked in him that morning that I've honestly very rarely ever seen in my son.
Yeah.
We're getting ready to leave. He goes into the kitchen. He gets his sister's book bag and walks it to her to the door and says, here you go, sissy. I got your bag for you.
What?
Yeah. I'm like, excuse me? What's going on right now? And then he opens the door for all of us, and we leave. He's like the most pleasant kid I've ever been around.
You're like, Olivia, come learn the preamble real quick.
Yeah, I'm like, what?
Megan, you need to learn the preamble.
I'm telling you, I'm like, what is going on right now? We get out to the car where normally there is almost a knockdown, drag-out fight for who's going to sit up front.
Yeah.
And he goes, is Mommy coming? I said, no, she's not coming with us today. She doesn't have to work or whatever. Oh, no, it was a Friday, so yeah, she doesn't have to go with us. And he goes, all right, sissy, would you like to sit up front? And I said,
dude,
what is going on? And then he gets in the car, and he grabs his book bag, and he opens it up, and he takes that folder out, and he's like, I'm going to keep studying. I'm going to keep studying, Dad. And I'm like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
And then he's like having these conversations with us, with me and Olivia. There's no fighting going on. It's like a different kid.
Yeah.
And I was telling Megan about it later, and she said, you know why that was? And at the moment, I'm like, no, I don't. Like, sometimes just maybe a switch gets flipped or something. I don't know. She goes,
wire
no.
gets connected, yeah.
No, she said, no, it's because of what you said to him on the couch. That changed his whole day.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, my gosh, I can't imagine the amount of times that I've said the wrong stuff that probably has destroyed his day.
Yeah.
Or the amount of times that I've said something, and this is something I'm thinking of right now, when he's been doing sports of some sort and been critical of him, that probably made his performance get even worse because of the stuff that I said, rather than just encouraging him in the midst of it. That's just something that I have to learn to do. But I'm telling you, parents, like, what we say about our kids when they are young will affect their trajectory when they are old, because we will live out the labels that are placed on us. And the ones that are placed on us by our parents, like Jacob got named by his parents.
Yeah.
The ones that are placed on us by family, man, those are hard to shake.
For sure.
We see that in the life of Jacob, because the very next thing that happens, and I know that you wanted to talk about this story, was Esau is out in the field. He's hunting. Because he's the hunter, Jacob is the homebody.
Yeah.
Esau is like all about like manly stuff, so like the exact opposite of me. Like, he's a hunter, he wants to do manly stuff. He's out in the field. Jacob is a lot more like me, although I'm not much of a cheater or swindler.
Yeah,
things like that.
But like, what?
He likes to. He's more of a mama's boy,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I am. I earned that label. Still as a 35-year-old man.
Yeah.
Still a mama's boy. I like to be around the home. I don't take me out into the woods. If you take me out in the woods, please just go ahead and kill me while we're out there.
Yeah.
So these two guys are so different. And so Jacob is at home and he's cooking, which, I don't do it a lot, but I actually like to. I posted a couple pictures last week of some of the stuff that I did.
Yeah, you got put
cooking.
through the ringer too, so.
I did. It's all good. It's all good. But, I don't mind doing that. But, Esau's the manly man, so he's out, and who knows how long he's been out hunting, because when he comes back into the house.
Well, it's for a while, so you got to look at the geography of that place.
Yeah.
And so, it's miles and miles away from where their home would be, because most everything that was around them was just open fields, and they're doing sheep and they're doing stuff like that, and they don't want to take their sheep to where their hunting grounds are. They want that's a daily process that they got to take their sheep, to the fields to feed them and water them and all that other stuff. So they're having to travel farther out, because that's where the animals are, where they're hunting, and you pack light. You hope to get an animal relatively quick. And so Esau's coming back, and from an unsuccessful hunt, and he's just extremely famished.
Yeah.
And this is like the most notorious act of trickery in Jacob's life that he plays against someone that he knows, a family member, because he tricks his brother into giving up his birthright for a bowl of soup.
Yeah, literally a bowl of beans, because it was lentils, which are disgusting.
I like lentil soup, but that's neither here nor there.
But
we don't need to get off in the food. We already know. We already know.
That's coming.
If it doesn't rhyme with hamburger, you don't like it.
That's true. But yeah, for a bowl of beans, he trades his birthright, which the birthright, again, this is going back to that term primogeniture. Because of that, it meant the firstborn would get a double portion of the family inheritance.
Yeah.
So that's what's on the line here. Literally, like, he's going to get like half of the inheritance.
Yeah.
And he's willing to trade that away for a bowl of beans.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, like, that has to be the most ridiculous story I've ever heard in my life.
You had to have been super hungry.
But
to not care about your future. You're like, I'm not going to have a future if I don't get some food in my stomach.
He's like, that birthright's no good to me if I die of hunger. It's like, you sound like my child right now. when they haven't eaten for 30 minutes and they're like, I'm starving. I'm like, come on, Esau.
Bro, you don't,
come on, man. Like,
you don't know what starving is.
Yeah, like you don't. Like, I'll tell my kids that all the time. I'm like, no. There's kids in Africa that know what starving is.
Yeah.
I saw you eating 30 minutes ago, bro. Like, you are not starving. You're not about to die. You're not famished. Esau comes in and he's like, literally gives up his birthright, forfeits his future for a bowl of beans.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm telling you what, if you've never read Swipe Right by Levi Lusko, to hear him talk about this story, you can go find the sermons. He preached on it too, in a series called Swipe Right. But he has a book called Swipe Right. It's all about sex and dating and stuff like that. But when he has this chapter called "You Don't Want What's in the Devil's Crock Pot."
Yeah.
And because he's talking about how a lot of us, though we're critical of Esau when we sit here and go like, Esau, that is the dumbest decision in the history of decisions.
Yeah. Until
we think of how we're constantly forfeiting our future for what we want in the moment, literally every single day.
Yep.
Like, I am not innocent of that whatsoever, right? I mean, like, this is the key to self-discipline in life, which I need to have more of, right? Like, what we want now ends up trumping what we want most. And it's not that we don't actually end up having good desires. It's that the immediacy of what we want now trumps that. We never get to what we want most.
Yeah.
And we literally end up trading God's blessing in our life for a bowl of beans. I mean, I can't tell you as a teenager how often, like, there was a decision made that because of what I wanted most now didn't matter. As a college student, what I wanted most now was, to have money, to go and to party and do whatever I wanted to live comfortably.
Yeah.
So taking those overages that they give you on student loan seemed like a great idea until now that I'm a 35-year-old adult male and I have to pay all that money back, right? Now that decision those years earlier are working against what I ultimately wanted in life.
Yeah.
In general. And so, like, we do that all the time, like, and Levi Lusko talks about it in regards to sex and relationships. Like, we there's been a lot of bowl. I think he talks about it in the terms of, like, there's a lot of bowls of beans that get taken care of, like, in the backseat of a car real quick, that ultimately you end up forfeiting what you wanted most in life, which was purity and a long-lasting relationship with your future spouse, and being able to share something special with them.
Yeah, meaningful intimacy.
You settled for a bowl of beans with some, guy that you barely knew.
Yeah.
And like what you ultimately have already robbed from your future in that moment. So he talks about it in regards to that, but we do that all the time. Like, I'm as guilty of anyone in my own physical health of how, like, what I want now is that iced honey bun. But what I actually would like to do is, like, to have shirts that fit. You know, like,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? So, but we make this, so we look at Esau and go like, gosh, Esau, you're such an idiot. How could you give up the double portion of your inheritance for that? And then we turn around and do it all the time, you know?
I mean, and it could be just the most simplest things. And, you know, like for me, it's like being like a better guitar player, but I'm not taking the time to practice on my own time. Whenever I get home, I'd rather watch a television show and get a good laugh for 30 minutes as opposed to just picking up my guitar. You know, even if I just took 5 minutes every single day and just spent a little bit of time with my guitar, then over the course of a month, I've spent hours doing this and getting better at it. And it's so true, man. It's so true. You just settle for the stuff that's just so insignificant and doesn't contribute value to your life, except for maybe give you an upset stomach.
Yeah.
I mean, because what do beans do? They give you upset stomachs.
Yeah. That's what, like, most people, they'll be like, oh, I don't have time to read the Bible and pray. I don't have time for a quiet time.
Yeah.
No, you do. You're just prioritizing something else over it. Like, because if one person has time for it, every person has time for it. There's just different values that are present in those situations.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you are prioritizing that extra 30 minutes of sleep because that's what you want now. But my guess is what you want most is intimacy with the Lord.
Yeah.
But you're sacrificing what you want most to have what you want now, which is 30 extra minutes of sleep.
Yeah.
And like we make this little small exchange that Esau made, that Esau made all the time. But when we look at this story and we go like, a bowl of beans, man, are you kidding me right now? And it's like, yeah, but that's what that decision is in your life. It's a bowl of beans.
Yeah.
Like, at the end of the day, if you ever settle for something in the moment that you want more than what you ultimately want, you have a bowl of beans. Because in comparison to what you want most, anything in the immediate is going to lack the value of that greater value that you have in your life. And so it's always a bowl of beans. And
you know, it's the biggest bowl of beans that steals more people's time and effort in trying to progress, and that's social media, Facebook. And I've noticed it because I've drastically cut down my time because I saw that you had done it, and I was like, man, he just seems like he's more productive. And I don't get on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok hardly ever anymore. And I'm finding that I have enough time to be able to spend and do the things that I want. Yeah. Pick up my guitar or the piano or start playing the piano at night. Yeah. And still have the time to be able to watch a 30-minute, comedy TV show.
No doubt about it. People that say, oh, I don't have time to read a book to, like, either draw closer to the Lord or just learn something to get better at for your profession. Yeah. No, you definitely do, bro. Look at your screen usage time. I'm on my phone a lot. Like, I will. But, like, I also have a lot of people that, like, and this is, again, not to toot my own horn. This is just what people say. Like, I don't understand how you get all the stuff done that you are, like, at work, like you're running a, it doesn't feel like it, but like a church of 400 is a top 10% church in, like, the whole country. Yeah. To be running a church that size, plus, like, managing a travel baseball team, a lot of times a little league team at the same time, and my daughter is doing all other stuff that I got to be there to support her. Yeah. And then, like, involved in some different, like, civic type stuff and whatnot. And I go and umpire, and I give private baseball lessons to help, as just like a side hustle. And, like, people look at them, they're like, I just don't get it. And it's like, well, there's just a lot of little decisions that I'm able to get a lot of stuff done in a shorter amount of time. Like, I had somebody I was interviewing actually for a part-time position for something recently, and they were like, well, how are you going to be able to do this, like, with your full-time job? I'm like, well, I don't fully know, but I know that I can accomplish a lot. Yeah. But it takes those little decisions. Like, so when it comes to work, I am, and this is what's weird about people. when it comes to work, I am like highly, highly, highly disciplined.
Yeah.
Like it takes, like this morning I was late for work. It takes a headache that I literally can't get out of bed to make me late for work, even on really bad days.
Yeah.
I put all my doctor's visits on Fridays. It's the way that I don't miss work.
Yeah.
I'm disciplined. When I'm here, I can get done as much as anyone in a short amount of time. Even if I've got, like you said, we were in a meeting all day Monday.
Yeah.
But I had 2 hours at the end of the day that helped me to prep for. I spoke 5 times yesterday. I spoke 3 times at the Cross Saints Christian School. Then I had a memorial service and a graveside service. I was able to take those 2 hours at the end of the day when I was completely dead, when I actually just wanted to go home, because I was like, oh, man, I got to umpire tonight. I could go home and just sit and relax. But I know if I do that, I'm going to pay the price for it tomorrow because I'm not ready for the 5 speaking engagements that I have. And so I stay a little bit longer, get all that prep work done, so that way when I finally leave, then I can actually go home and make the decision like, hey, I'm going to sit on the couch for an hour because I'm exhausted, but I'm exhausted for a good reason because I actually put in a good day's work.
Oh, yeah.
And then I'm able to wake up to yesterday and just go and be present in all those places that God has placed me. And, like, in between those, like, I had 3 back-to-back-to-back chapels that I spoke, and then the graveside service wasn't until 1 o'clock. They were in the same area of town, and my parents happen to live in that area. So I just went to their house and sat and watched TV for an hour and a half in the midst of all that because I had paid the price on Monday because I knew speaking 3 times in 2 hours was going to level me.
Yeah.
So I had already paid the price by being prepped on Monday when I didn't want to do it, so that way Tuesday I could just go and be present. I wanted to be present with those students. I wanted to be present with that family at the graveside, and I wanted to be present with that family at the memorial service, and I wouldn't have been able to do that had I not paid the price on Monday because I might be worried about all this different stuff going on Tuesday. And when I can come in today, and I knew we had a Facebook Live at noon, I was able to spend 2 hours to prep for that 1 hour Facebook Live, even though I know there was other stuff that I could have been doing in that time. And then, this is going to take an hour and a half to do this podcast, but it's all right because I know when I'm done with this, I'm not going to leave work, even though I'd like to, because I'm completely spent. I'm going to pay the price now, so the way tomorrow, Thursday, which is the end of our week, when I hit the finish line finally with that sermon and everything else that I got to do,
Yeah.
I'm gone.
Yeah.
And then I enjoy my weekend as much as anybody. Like I don't, I'll be up here Friday to do, but long story short, it's like if you'll pay the price. And now I wish when it comes to work, I'm that disciplined. But like if you look at me right now as like overweight and, completely out of shape, why can't I be that disciplined in that area of my life? Because in certain areas of my life, I'm super, super disciplined, and then other areas of my life,
Yeah.
I'm a complete disaster. It feels like where it goes hot and cold, whereas like with work, like I'm very disciplined.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to like eating and exercising and stuff, not so much. Like when it comes to personal development, very disciplined about listening to podcasts and reading books and watching YouTube videos and stuff. But then, like, in a different area of my life, I'm so like, if you were to only look at that area, you'd be like, "That is the most undisciplined person on the face of the earth." But I think that we're all like that, probably. Like, we all probably have these areas.
Well, I think it all comes down to I mean, not to continue to kind of go down this trail, but I think it all just comes down to desire.
Yeah.
Obviously, with myself and you, like, I'd like to be stinking jacked. I'd like to have muscles and stuff like that. But my desire is I like things that rhyme with hamburger.
Yeah.
And so I don't do those things. And I know that I'm getting better at other areas of my life, like my planning, my preparation. Like I showed you right before we started this, like I'm trying to get so stinking far ahead. Like Like, I'm pretty determined to have like the basic concept for all of our sermon series for 2023 done before the end of the year.
Yeah.
Like, I'm dead set on that. Like, I want to get it done. That way I don't have to fight it. And it gives me enough time to process some critique as well, because I want to show people, hey, what can we tweak on this just to make it better? Because I think that I want it to be the best, the absolute best. But whenever it comes to working out and eating right, like I think I eat a lot better than you do because I like vegetables and stuff like that. But I also do like my hamburgers and stuff.
Yeah.
But is my desire for that as strong as my desire to succeed in the workplace, succeed in what God has asked me to do? What am I doing to grow this ministry? What am I doing to advance and point people in the right direction with their relationship with Jesus? Like, that for me trumps everything. And I know that I need to be taking care of myself because my physical body is what's allowing me to be able to do the things that God has asked me to do.
Yes.
But it hasn't made that wire hasn't connected yet.
Yeah.
I could say it. I've heard it said. But the desire to do those things to where I can continue to do the things that God has asked me to do, for some reason, there's like a disconnect between those things.
Yeah, it really is. And
it's baffling.
It's a long way around. It's like, but we make that choice of what we want now more than what we want ultimately.
Yeah.
And just like Esau, we end up paying a really big price.
Yeah.
In that. And so Jacob ends up with the lion's share of the inheritance. But again, it came at the expense of alienating his brother, of hurting someone close to him, which, as we already know from earlier, he was going to get it anyways.
Yeah.
Now, when God pronounced that over him as a, like when he was still in the womb, I don't think God had the means by which you would acquire that is going to be sin. Of course not. There was going to be...
his whole life he was deceiving and tricking people.
Yeah.
So he thought that he had to continue to deceive and trick people,
and so it's
buying into that label.
Yeah, and so it's sad that, like, God was going to bring that about in his life. Had he been patient and waited on God, he wouldn't have had to cut corners. That's why, how many... I can't imagine the amount of people that want to be married so bad that you just settle for who's right in front of you rather than waiting on who God actually has for you.
Yeah.
And then you end up like, oh, well, this is my third marriage because I just got to be married. I got to be married rather than waiting on God's person for you. Like, we just cut those corners. And it's like, well, if God told you that you were going to have it, he'll see to it that you have it.
Yeah.
Like, that he's good to his promise. Like, whatever he said, he will bring to pass. And you do not have to cheat or cut corners to go and find it.
Yeah.
And that's the sad thing. He ended up with what God wanted him to have, but he got it in a way that he can't even be proud about it. And that has to suck. Like, to finally get what you want, but you can't, like... I wouldn't want to go tell that story, No. Like, I wouldn't want to go tell that story like, oh, here's how I got it. Like, I cheated my brother and now he wants to kill me, like, type deal. It's like, no, that's a terrible story. And then, as I know that you know, and probably most of the listeners, but maybe if not, that's all right. We're here to learn. This isn't the last time that he does this.
No, he
to
does
his brother.
Yeah. He does it again by putting on a fleece from an animal, and because his dad is sick, he's lost his sight, and his hearing is not the best, and it's just, and even his smell is kind of going too.
Yeah,
because apparently, if you're born red and hairy, you have a distinct smell about yourself. So
yeah, well, and so his dad is going to confer the family blessing, which as we read this as 21st century Americans, we're like, this is the most ridiculous thing ever.
But it's a will reading, essentially.
But to the Hebrews, it was like, whatever I pronounce over you, I fully believe that God will bring it to pass.
Yeah.
So this blessing was not like something arbitrary, like...
Yeah.
No, this was something, they really believed that God would be faithful to bring this stuff about. And so, Isaac... Jacob and Esau's father, it's time for him to confer the family blessing. And he tells Esau, hey, go out into the field, kill me something, make me something to eat, bring it in, and it's time for me to give you the blessing because I'm going to die soon.
Yeah.
Well, this part is crazy to me, that his wife overhears that conversation and goes to Jacob, and she is now the one pushing him to live out the label.
Yeah.
She goes, hey, here's what we're going to do. I'll cook up something real quick. We're going to put your brother's clothes on you. Maybe we're going to put stuff on your arms to make you feel hairy, which is like that. Like the level of this deception. And again, he had already been promised everything that like God was already going to bless his life. He didn't have to rob his brother of this whatsoever. He was the one. He was the chosen one in this moment, and he did it anyway. So he literally goes in and lies to his own father, pretends to be someone else. And I'll never forget, Stephen Furtick had a sermon series called Death to Selfie, where he just focused on Jacob, and even though I may not like everything that he says, this is not a blanket endorsement of Stephen Furtick's ministry, nor is it a blanket, discredit of it. I'm just saying I watched this series, and I'll never forget. He said, "God cannot bless who you pretend to be," because in that moment he thinks he's getting the blessing, and it's like, listen, God. When you want to live fake, God can't bless that version of you.
Yeah.
God won't bless that fake version of you. Like, you got to be real about who you are and where you're at if you want to see the blessing of God in your life. So God will not bless who you pretend to be. Like, just be who he made you to be. Be proud of that person, and that's a person that God can bless.
Yeah. I like the story of it just because it's so good, because like even though Jacob was this evil, deceptive person, just a natural born trickster, so to speak, there is redemption for him. His mom gets wind that Esau is planning to kill him, and then she sends Jacob to go live with her brother, which is his uncle. And I can't remember for the life of me. Was it on the way to visiting his uncle that he wrestled with God?
No, it's on the way back. So
okay, so it's
Jacob,
after. So
Jacob flees to an area called Padan Aram,
yeah,
which is an amazing hometown name.
Yeah,
he flees there because his mom says, hey, your brother's going to kill you, which he probably deserved it, to be honest. So he takes off, and he goes to live with his Uncle Laban in Padan Aram. And
it sounds like one of the lyrics to that Black Betty song.
Oh, yeah.
Whoa, Black Betty, Padan Aram.
Yes. Yeah. Padan Aram. And that's where he flees to. And there he actually gets really, really wealthy.
Yeah.
And
he does get a taste of his own medicine too from his uncle.
Yeah. His Uncle Laban gets him because I love this is why the Bible's so awesome. He's supposed to work 7 years to get Rachel, whom he loves.
Yeah.
And on the night of his wedding, Laban sneaks in Leah, the older daughter, because the older daughter has to be married first. That's just the custom of the people.
It says there's not even a glisten in her eye.
Yeah,
that's how they described her in the Bible.
It says that she has weak eyes. She has weak eyes, which means she's ugly.
I used to have that, but I had surgery because I had a lazy eye. But I mean, I could be ugly too.
But yeah, so they're saying like Leah was not his first choice because she was ugly.
Yeah,
and so Laban has to like trick the trickster and gave him a little piece of his own medicine, and then he had to work another 7 years to get Rachel.
Yeah,
and then the story gets crazy from there.
Yeah,
because Rachel, whom that Jacob loves, God's not allowing her to have kids.
Yeah,
Leah, who he's not a big fan of, is the one that God will bless to have kids, and so he has to start sleeping.
I mean, he's got to like her a little bit if she's having kids.
Yeah. So, that's what happens is like, she like, it's been a while since I studied the story, but I think that she makes some sort of deal with Rachel to where she's the one that he comes to bed with for the night. Because, again, I don't know the arrangement or the particulars of what happens when you have two wives, but there was some sort of, like, arrangement that was made that, like, okay, on this night, he's going to come stay with me. And lo and behold, she ends up pregnant. And then now this becomes a battle between these sisters.
It's a competition.
And so much a competition that Jacob ends up with not one wife, not two wives, but 4 wives.
Yeah, because he marries.
Each of the daughters gives their servant to him as a wife as well. So the way they get credit for all the children that come from the servants.
Yeah.
Because they're just trying to see how many kids they can stack up for Jacob, because they're both fighting for his affection. And so he ends up, at the end of this whole little Padan Aram story, unbelievably wealthy.
Yeah.
With tons of kids, 4 wives, like this big caravan. Like he is between all the livestock, all of his kids, all the possessions and everything. He is an incredibly wealthy man when he leaves.
Yeah.
And that's when he on his way back is when he wrestles with God. But it's really, again, he did get tricked by Laban, but you can still see that there's part of him that's still the trickster and the swindler, because he decides to leave without even telling Laban. So he takes all of Laban's kids and grandkids and stuff, and so he gets tracked down and whatnot. So you can still see that there's a little bit of that shadiness in him.
Yeah.
And so he's on his way back, and he knows that he's going to come face to face with his brother at one point.
Well, just to kind of backtrack a little bit, like the trickery in him is still there whenever this whole situation of the competition between his wives and the kids, and then the servants that they were given to him. At this time, he's growing his livestock, and what he's doing is he's putting these branches in the water that they're drinking, so it would discolor or make the sheep and the goats spotted or speckled, so he could grow his own own. Because he told Laban that he's like, hey, like, I've worked for you this long, I haven't been paid. Like, what can you give me for payment? He's like, well, you could take anything that's like,
all the
imperfect ones. And so what he's doing is he's throwing all these bushes and trees or whatever inside the water, right around the area where all the animals are mating, and they're all coming out spotted and striped and speckled and everything else. And so the perfect animals are not reproducing at the rate that the other ones are. I don't know. It was crazy. He's
still up to his old ways in some sense.
He's
but the other part of that we have to remember too, this is crazy, is God is part of that equation, and he is blessing Jacob even when he does not deserve it whatsoever.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe there was like a showdown between the two scoundrels, because Laban is clearly a scoundrel in some sense, and so is Jacob. But like in the midst of Jacob, even again living up to his name, God is still blessing that, because at the end of the day, God could have said, nope, I'm only going to let there be perfect animals come out, so that way you get nothing.
Yeah.
But no, God allows this whole little charade to take place, and God's blessing it. So he leaves town with all of this stuff, and he's on his way back. He knows he's going to come face to face with his brother. And he comes up with this idea, because again, the trickster part of him is it's not taken care of yet. It's not been redeemed yet whatsoever. So he's thinking, if I got to come face to face with Esau, I'm going to bribe him. I'm going to send him a caravan of gifts of all of this vast wealth that I've acquired, to make sure he won't kill me as soon as he sees me.
Tons of stuff, too.
So he sends all this stuff ahead to try to appease his brother. And then he takes his wives, that's weird to say, wives, and all of his kids. He takes them and puts them with all the rest of his possessions in one place, and then he actually crosses the river and goes, and he's all by himself again.
Yeah.
And that's where this like epic wrestling match with God takes place, which I think it's a weird story to me because I feel like we are going to lose any wrestling match with God.
For sure.
But there's a sense in which, I guess for the purposes of the story, that Jacob is like holding his own against God in this wrestling match. And it's not until God wrenches his hip that he finally kind of relents. But even at that moment, like when the renaming comes, like we see that it wasn't, it was just weird. But I love this session because this is how I close that sermon that I preach on this, because I'll talk about how Jacob lives up to his name over and over and over and again. Then he gets a little taste of his own medicine on his way back. He's still kind of up to his own ways. Yeah. But he has this moment where he's wrestling with someone. He doesn't know that it's God in the moment, but he comes to find out that this is what's taking place. And it's in Genesis 32. It says, this left Jacob all alone in the camp. This is when he crossed back over. And he wrestled with, and a man came and wrestled with him until the dawn began to break. And when the man saw that he would not win the match, so again, that's just weird to think, okay, this is God, but he says he saw that he would not win the match. He touched Jacob's hip and wrenched it out of socket. And then the man said, "Let me go, for the dawn is breaking." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." And verse 27 is life-changing, game-changer. The man, who is God, looks at Jacob and he says, "What is your name?" This one thing that's been responsible for most of his story, if not all of his story.
Yeah.
That's what God wants him to come clean about. And he says, "What's your name?" Like, are you going to own up to the fact that you are Jacob, that you are the swindler, that you are the cheater, that you are the one that cuts corners to get what you want? Are you willing to come clean? Because that's the question that God has for all of us. Like, are you willing to repent? Are you willing to say, "No, I did do that. I did fall short. I did make that mistake"? Or are you going to try to make excuses to try to escape accountability? And so in this one question, what is your name? That's what's wrapped up into it. Like, because at the minute that Jacob replies, Jacob, he's going, "Yeah, that's what's true about me. I'm a cheater. I cut corners. I messed my family over. I had to go and be exiled away from my family because of what I've done." And so he's owning up to all of that, because that's what he says. Verse 27, "What is your name?" the man asked. And he replied, "Jacob." And at the minute that he says that and comes clean, I identify with my past. I'm responsible for it and all of this. Then verse 28, God responds, "Your name will no longer be Jacob. From now on you will be called Israel, because you have fought with God and with men and have won." And so it's like all of your past that is associated with that label that has been on you since your birth is taken away, and God changes your name. He gives you a new label. He gives you a new name. And from there, he gives you a new future. He makes you a new creation. And that's what we see happen in the life of Jacob. Like, he says, "Look, yeah, that's what used to be true about you. Yes, you used to be an alcoholic, but no. Now I call you my beloved. Like, you used to be an abuser, but now I call you a friend of God. Like, you used to be whatever it is, fill in the blank. You used to be that, but I'm telling you, when you come clean before God, he will replace that label with something new." He calls you like, "Oh, man, my past is ugly." Yeah, but I have a beautiful future for you. Like, that's what he does in the story of Jacob. He takes this thing that represents all of his failure, and he gives him a new name that represents the new thing that God's going to do in his life. From now on, you'll be called Israel. And from there, it's like, oh my goodness. You mean to tell me that the rest of the Bible in one way or another is going to be connected to this guy who did all that stuff to his family?
Yeah, he was the patriarch of the 12 tribes of Israel, all of his kids. So.
You're absolutely right. Everything else that happens is going to be tied to this one guy who, guess what, didn't have it all together.
Yep.
But when the time came for him to make it right with God, he owned up to it, and God replaced that old name and gave him a new name, making him a new creation. And from there, now God is using him. He birthed the 12 tribes of Israel. I mean, it's just unreal, because with Jacob, all the failure is tied up, but with Israel, the future is what is in focus now.
Yeah. Yeah. Goodness gracious, that's so stinking good. You said you've preached something along those lines before?
Yeah, I have used it. I've probably used a version of that here at Southridge, but it's been a long time.
I think you did it for one of the Recovery Point days.
I did do it for Recovery Point Beauty Day last year.
Yeah.
And I used it at 2 youth events last year. But what I do whenever I teach this is at the beginning of the talk, I have everyone have those little "Hello, my name is" tags. And when I'm sharing my own personal story, I'll start writing my own labels of what I feel about me, or what people have said about me, or what's been true about me, and I'll put those on me, and I'll preach in those labels until I get to this point, and then I'll take them off and I'll replace them with what God says is true about me. But I have the kids that are sitting in there also write that thing down.
Yeah.
And so I can't tell you, because normally what we'll do is we'll have them write that down at the beginning, and then they'll sit there and hold it, and they'll listen to the sermon.
Mm-hmm.
And when we get to the response time, when I'm changing my labels over, then we'll have altars set up where they can go and write a new name, something that God is whispering to them, that this is what's true of them. And so what we have them do, though, is we have them lay those old ones down, and then we come and pick them up a lot of times. Because especially like we did this at when I spoke out in Missouri, was that last year? 2 years ago? Whenever I was in Missouri, we did this, and we picked those up, and me and the guy that was organizing this kind of looked through them, and I mean, your jaw would be on the floor.
Yeah.
Of the stuff that people have said about these kids.
Or that they believe.
Or that they believe.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that say that, talk about how suicidal they are, that someone said they were no good, someone called them a whore, like what, I mean, like all of this stuff. And like, so we picked all those up, actually in Missouri, and I gave them to this guy. I said, hey, I think that you need to send this to every youth pastor here, so the way they know what their kids are dealing with, and they can preach to help their kids. But I mean, these have been some of the most impactful things I've ever seen in ministry. Like when we did this at West Virginia State Youth Camp last year, I mean, later that night after that sermon, I actually had to leave. I don't know if I had to leave or I chose to leave or something. I was tired of the camp life, so I might have been going home to rest for the night. So I left, and I didn't do the late night activity. Well, the late night activity was supposed to be some sort of talent show or something. I found out the next day that because of all the healing that God did in that service in people's hearts, it spawned like an 1.5 hour long testimony service, completely led by the students, where they were getting up and talking about the new name that God had given them after amazing. What God, after everything. And I was hearing that the next day, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I went home.
Yeah.
Like, I cannot believe I missed that. But it's one of my reasons why I love Jacob so much.
Yeah.
But again, it's because it's like Peter, who I talked about it when I was preaching yesterday at Cross Lanes Christian. I like Jacob because I identify with Jacob. I feel like there was a good chunk of my life that was living out labels that other people had put on me, and now there's a new part of my life where I'm living out the labels that God has placed on me.
Yeah.
And so I identify so much with Jacob because his story is all of our story in some way.
Super good, super good. I hope that that word and that message encourages whoever's listening to this today just to begin to live out and believe what the Lord has called and named you and labeled you as opposed to what the world and what sin and what the devil has tried to label you as.
Yeah.
So, awesome, man. Alrighty. I know your favorite part of the day, our mystery meat question. Quick question. Did you watch last week's episode?
I listened to it, yeah.
The randomness?
Yes, I listened to it, but I was in the car with Megan, so there was a lot of conversation going on simultaneously, I believe.
So I have a question for are you gonna be on next week's episode? Because then it'll be like you were on episode 1, and are we gonna do this like full circle? Like, are you gonna be like the first? Because it's a full year.
Yeah.
Next week it's been 52 weeks.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's been one full year of the shenanigans of whatever's come out of our mouths on the pastor's potluck.
Wow. Yeah, I will tell you this. I like I like doing what we just did here.
Yeah.
I like the funny topics and stuff. I'm sure people get a kick out of those.
Yeah,
but
they're good for every once in a while.
I love talking about the Bible.
Yeah.
So I feel like we've made a little bit of a shift in the podcast to where I'm doing more of that, and I really, really like that. So I hope in season 2 of the podcast that we do a lot more of that. And yeah, I think we should talk about next week's episode and maybe do it. Maybe have multiple people on to make the week 52 super killer.
Yeah.
So.
Alrighty, man.
All right, let's get it over with. I put questions in there, but I have not had a single one ever come out.
No, this is a good one. Yeah. If you were arrested with no explanation, what would your friends and family assume you had done?
Oh, I'm not answering that. I have no earthly. If you were arrested with no explanation, what do I think people would think?
Okay, I'll read it again.
Yeah, help me.
If you were arrested with no explanation, cops came up and they arrested you, and they didn't tell you what you were arrested for, but they got a hold of your friends and family, and they didn't tell them why you were arrested, what would your friends and family think that you got arrested for?
I would have no earthly idea. Who came up with this?
I did.
Oh my gosh.
I think one of two things for me. I think that people would say, "Oh my gosh, he started drinking again." That's that label.
Logical. Yeah.
That's logical, and they're like, "Oh, what did he do?" Or they finally said he snapped. He snapped. Jared snapped. We understand that he doesn't like driving with all the crazy people in this world, and he probably ran somebody off the road.
Yeah. I don't know. Mine might be that I finally fought someone at a baseball game. I don't know. I'm not ever going to do that, but that would be those are the moments that I feel the closest to something like that happening.
It's either a coach or an umpire, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
As the kids get older, maybe them, but yeah, no. I mean, if I have to answer that question, I would say something funny like that.
Yeah.
Because I have, wow, that's a lot. That's definitely mystery meat. So
yeah, I wonder if like some of like the stuff that I did, like they had secret cameras and they finally found out that it was me.
Yeah.
That was doing some of this stuff, and they're like, dude, we know it's been like 15 years or whatever.
Yeah. Or it would be something like, he hasn't paid his taxes. And I'm like, yeah, that's reasonable because I'm not even really sure what taxes are. So,
yeah.
Like something like that. Like there's, again, going back to this, the lack of discipline in certain areas of my life.
Yeah.
I could see it being something like that. They're like, yeah, you didn't pay your taxes last year. I'm like, oh, really? That's a thing. Cool.
Yeah.
Take me to jail. Maybe something like that.
Yeah.
Or, your grass is too long and we're going to fine you, and then you don't pay the fines and they come get you.
Nah.
I could see that.
They can't arrest you on that.
Maybe if it went long enough. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up now because this question is really difficult. So it's like maybe it was that. I don't know.
Well, I promise you this, and I'm pretty sure you can make the same promise. I'm not ever going to start drinking again, so you don't have to worry about that. You just have to make me a promise that you'll never get in a fight with a with a random umpire or baseball coach.
I promise.
Attaboy.
I promise.
See, now you're living in the labels that God has put on you.
Because, and the reason why I promise that is, like, honestly, early on in coaching, and I know I, like, probably left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth because, like, I just I could not figure out how to coach in a way or just be competitive in a way that's not, like, over the top, because that's just kind of who I am. Like I wasn't like this when I was younger as far as being loud. I've always been competitive, but, like, I'm just a loud person in general. Like, when I preach, I'm just louder than the average person. Like, when I was at the school yesterday, the first 2 sessions, they were like, yeah, you don't need that microphone. I'm like, so I'm just loud. So, like, sometimes, like, when I'm on the ball field, like, I'm just being loud, and I'm not, like, not being harsh. I'm just loud.
Yeah. And
so, like, I've had to learn a lot of that, and there's still times but it's so much better from that first year of, like, when Landon really got into competitive sports until now. Like, the difference is, like, crazy. But I know there was probably people that saw me 2 years ago. They're like, that guy is a nut.
Yeah,
he should be kept away from the kids. But, like, now it's like, no, it's getting progressively better. Now, you could see me this weekend at the tournament, and the kids do something. Really, the only person that drives me insane now are the 2 that are related to me. The rest of them, I'm pretty good at showing some grace to, for the most part. But the 2 that are related to me, I just, like, so probably a lot of what, if people were to look at it and go like, oh, we didn't know that was your son. Yeah, we yell at our kids like that too. Type deal, because it's like my son and my nephew that play for me, like, they're the 2 that I'm like, oh my goodness gracious. So that has gotten a lot better. So no fighting. I won't fight anyone at a baseball game.
I'm not drinking.
I'm not a fighter though. We'll have to get into this sometime. But I've been in a bunch of fights and never thrown a punch in my life.
I think you mentioned that to me one time.
That's like that will pique everyone's interest.
Yeah.
How did I get into a bunch of fights and I've never thrown a punch in my life?
That's so good.
Yeah. So come and listen to episode 52, and I might grace you with some of those stories.
Yeah, for sure. Well, man, I this topic was a good one. We kind of briefly mentioned, and we may set it up to where we do this, but we're gonna slowly make our way down the genealogy leading up to Jesus, and whenever we get to him, obviously we've got. But there's so many different things and truths and ideas that we can take from these stories, and how does it apply to us, and how can we look at these situations differently than just a book of stories? Like what truths can we take away from it? But this one was a fantastic one, and I hope that so many people listen to this story, because it's such just our conversation today is just so important for sure.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you, dude. Hey, we'll see you all next week. Hey, thank you so much. Real quick, I was looking over the stats, and you'll be surprised by this. So there's only now one continent that we haven't had listeners on, and that's Antarctica.
Come on, Antarctica.
So we've had people in South America start to listen. We've had people in Australia start to listen.
Well, not to restart the podcast because I know it's over.
Yeah.
But you know that you're not allowed to just go to Antarctica?
No.
Like, you actually have to have permission and go through, like, proper channels to go.
Yeah.
So, like, you just can't go there. Like,
no.
Oh, I'd like to go there. It's like, no, you're actually not allowed.
There's
and I learned
training
that on the Nate Land podcast.
Yeah, there's training you have to go to, because they don't want you leaving anything behind.
That's so, like, I did not know that at all. Like, literally, you're not allowed to, like, you can't just on a whim be like, 1 ticket to Antarctica, please. Like, nope, that's against the rules. Okay, sorry. We're going to let you guys go. Seriously, thank you all. But Antarctica, get it together.
Yeah, get it together. Penguins. Come on now. Cue that music. Thank you so much for listening in with us today. We really appreciate it. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You can also follow us on social media, on Facebook, Instagram. You can also watch the video version of this on YouTube as well. All you have to do is search up the Pastor's Potluck Podcast. From all of us here, we want to say thank you, and we'll see you next week.